Who is Jesus? So people ask all the time, how do you know God is real? And one of the most compelling answers to that is Jesus Christ, who claimed to be the Son of God, claimed to come to earth, and did some things that only God himself could do. He walked on water, he fed 5,000 people with just 5 small loaves and 2 small fish. He calmed storms, raised people from the dead, and ultimately he himself came back from the dead. Now follow this for a second. This is a pretty compelling argument. Jesus claimed to be God. In Luke 23, verse 3, the Bible says, "So Pilate asked Jesus, 'Are you the king of the Jews?' 'Yes, it is as you say,' Jesus replied." That's why he was crucified. On the cross, they wrote on there, "The Son of God, King of the Jews." Earlier, a couple hours earlier, he's with the disciples in John chapter 14, and he tells them he's going to go back to the Father. One of them, Andrew, turns to him and says, "Jesus, show us the Father, and it'll be enough for us." And Jesus says to him, "Don't you know, Philip, even after I've been among you for such a long time, anyone who has seen me has seen the Father." Jesus claims to be God. Now, follow this argument for a second, if you will. Jesus claimed to be God. Now, there's only 2 possibilities with that. Either it's true or it's false. If it's true, if Jesus claimed to be God and it really is true, then he's the Lord. If it's false, though, there's 2 possibilities. One is it's false and he knew it, and the other is it's false and he didn't know it. Now, if Jesus claimed to be God and he knew he wasn't, you'd have to call him a liar. He knew he wasn't God, he was lying. But if Jesus claimed to be God and he wasn't, but he really thought he was God, you'd have to call him a lunatic. So throughout history, people have concluded that you can't say that Jesus was just a good moral teacher. There's only 3 possibilities. Either he is who he said he was, Lord and God, or he's a liar or a lunatic. C.S. Lewis, the great author of the 20th century and Oxford Don, was a avowed atheist who, after looking at an argument like that, decided he had to bow down and worship Jesus. Later on, he wrote these words, "A man who was merely a man and said the sort of things that Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He would either be a lunatic, on a level with a man who says he's a poached egg, or else he would be the devil of hell. You must make your choice. Either this man was and is the Son of God, or else a madman or something else." I mean, you think about what happened to Jesus in just his last 48 hours on earth. On what we call Good Friday, Jesus was arrested in the garden. He was taken by the temple priests to trial, where he was sentenced to death. And before he died, the Romans flogged him 39 times with a cat of 9 tails. It's a multiple-edged whip, 9 different, or possibly even more, scourges, all with bone or metal attached to it, designed to rip the flesh off of your body. The reason they used 39 lashes rather than 40, in fact they called it sometimes 40 minus 1, is because if you whipped a man 40 times, chances were good he would die from that. And the Romans didn't want their victims to die from flogging. They wanted them to be weakened and humiliated before they killed them in the way they really wanted to kill them, which was through crucifixion. So on Good Friday, while the flesh is hanging off of the back of Jesus, literally his organs would have been showing through his flesh on his back, they put a crown of thorns on his head, they put a 110-pound crossbeam on his shoulders, and they marched him up just a slight recline to a hill called Golgotha. On the way, Jesus, this construction-working carpenter, was so weakened by what had happened to him, he was unable to carry the crossbeam any farther. So another man, Simon of Cyrene, was enlisted to carry the cross the rest of the way. When they reached the place where Jesus was to be crucified, they put nails through his wrists here and his feet, nailed him to the cross, where he suffocated over the next 6 hours as God laid on him the sins of the world, and the thing that he'd gone through so weakened him that when the professional Roman executioner came to see whether he was still alive or not, realized he was dead, he confirmed Jesus' death by taking a spear and thrusting it under his rib cage, pierced his heart, where pericardial fluid, clear liquid surrounding the heart, flowed out of it, confirming his death. This Roman executioner, who had killed probably hundreds of other people, pronounced him dead on the spot, and then said this, having only seen Jesus for those few hours, and only at his worst, he said, "Surely this man was the Son of God." You've probably heard the story. From there, Joseph of Arimathea takes Jesus' body off the cross. He puts it in his own tomb, where it's wrapped in 90 to 100 pounds of spice-soaked cloths from head to toe, cutting off Jesus' ability to breathe were he still alive by any remote chance. And then the tomb is sealed with a 1.5 to 2 ton stone rolled across the front. The Romans put their own seal on it, and the sentence for breaking a Roman seal is, "You yourself will be crucified upside down." Then the Romans place 16 guards, a Roman cohort, in front of it. This guard group is designed to sleep in 4-hour rotations and guard their piece of land against hundreds of people who could come against it. Highly trained men are there for the next 36 hours. And then the story is on Resurrection Sunday morning, the stone bursts open, those Roman guards freak out and run. Jesus bursts forth from the grave, and when his disciples come back to finish the job of his burial, because they didn't have time to do it on Friday night, they discover the tomb is empty. 5 different people investigate the tomb and all confirm that the tomb is empty. Then 11 of those 12 disciples, one of them's committed suicide, 11 of the 12 commit the rest of their lives to telling Jesus' story all around the world. 10 of them die as martyrs. The 11th one, John, dies in exile outside of his own country. Sure, people sometimes will die for a lie, but not if they know it's a lie. And if Jesus didn't rise from the grave, clearly the disciples would have known that. In fact, their own reaction is a verification that Jesus really did rise from the grave, because they are depressed and distraught and thinking about going back to their old jobs, wondering what they'll do with the rest of their lives during the 36 hours that Jesus is in the grave. When he rises, they are so shocked by this, they become the greatest missionaries, the greatest evangelists of all of history. The Apostle Paul tells us that 515 people, no less than that, perhaps even more, but at least 515 people saw Jesus alive after his death. And 50 days after his death, the Apostle Peter stands up in downtown Jerusalem and addresses thousands of people with these words. He says, "Men of Israel, listen to this. Jesus of Nazareth was a man accredited by God to you by miracles, wonders, and signs which God did among you. And you yourselves know this." Why? Because they were there. They were eyewitnesses. "This man was handed over to you by God's set purpose and foreknowledge, and you, with the help of wicked men, put him to death by nailing him to the cross." If this wasn't true, they would have stoned Peter. But Peter's talking to eyewitnesses who all knew that Jesus had performed miracles, that he had died, and that he had risen. They're not arguing with him. In fact, 3,000 of them give their lives to Christ on that day that Peter gives this sermon. So there are a lot of reasons to believe that God exists. One of the most compelling ones is that Jesus came to earth and demonstrated that there is a God, spoke about God, and showed us what God was like because he was God himself.